Today on the Level Up Show, I just welcome you so much, your presence, for being here. We're on show number 4, and I like to say that because we're not just here, we're broadcasting here on the radio, YouTube, and all different platforms. So just knowing that I'm tending to a video and you listening with your ears too. So this is going to be part 1 of a 2-part series, and we're going to be talking about being the change that you want to see in the world. And so what I'm saying is, like, we want to see change in the world, right? We probably can see there's so much going on and we want it to change, but we don't know how to make it change. I'm here to tell you today that you can level up and be a part of the change in the world that you want to see. So with that, I'll tell you, be the first. And what does that mean? When I speak about being the first, it means be the first person to talk, whatever that looks like for you. Be the first person to invite, whatever that means. Invite somebody out for a cup of coffee, invite, some friends over for a group, invite. Be the first to invite. How about saying you're sorry? Be the first to say you're sorry. I know it's not always easy, but it's something that we are called to do. And I want to remind you that whatever is talked about here, take what works for you and leave the rest, because all of our minds are not exactly the same. So, just take what works for you today, leave the rest, meaning just leave what does not pertain to you. And we're here to not be a judgmental crowd, but we're here to work together as a community to make this world a better place. Also, I want to say that I want to do a trigger. I want to say that some people might be triggered about what I'm talking about today, because we're going to be talking about some real stuff, some deep stuff. I'm going to be taking you on a journey and starting with my roots. Now, in other podcasts and other radio shows, I did talk about my roots in the very beginning, but I didn't go quite as deep as to what that looked like. And so when it comes to my roots, I'm going to tell you about my family and exactly where I came from. I came from a family of 5 boys. Actually, there's 5 children, sometimes 5 boys, because my uncle lived with us for some of the time, but I had 4 brothers and I was the baby. And sometimes I had 5 brothers because my uncle would live with us from time to time. And I grew up on a farm. And so, I think we had the white picket fence. I'm almost positive there was a white picket fence out there when I say that we grew up on a farm. It was 10 acres and we had all of the things. We had the animals, like horses. We had, I don't think we had cows, but we definitely had pigs, and our pigs had babies one time. I recall my dad and my brothers all building the barn for those pigs. We had 10 acres that was a cornfield. We had a garden that as a family we would go out there and pick the weeds and garden pick the weeds and then pick the harvest too. We had, it was a white house with black shutters, and it was a 2-story house. All the kids' bedrooms were upstairs and my parents were downstairs. But there was one thing going on in my family, and most of our families, as we know, we have dysfunction. I'm just going to say we all come from a place of imperfection. And the dysfunction in our family, and sometimes referred to as the elephant in the room, was there was an alcoholism problem within my family. And at that young, ripe age, and when we moved into that house with my 4 brothers, sometimes my uncle, 5 brothers, and my mom and dad, I was really young. I think I was maybe around 1 year old. And just to paint the picture, our family, I think it was unique in this way where we didn't have a lot of family. I didn't have grandparents. So my grandparents on my dad's side were not there. And then my mom's side, my grandpa passed away before I was born. My grandma held me one time when I was a baby, and that was it. And so here we are on this farm without what some people would say, well, I'm sure your grandparents were there to give a helping hand. Not so much. We were out in the country, and we built this house. My parents built this house from scratch too. So, but back to the elephant in the room. I didn't know what was going on because I was so young. You know, 1, 2, 3, of course you don't know. 4, you start to awaken. 5, you start to be paying more attention. But the one thing that I noticed is sometimes my dad was not home at night. And I have glimpses of looking out my brother's window, wondering if dad's truck was home yet. And I never really understood what that meant at that young age. And when he would come home, he would usually be in bed, and I knew that he drank milk, and I'm not sure what else to recover. But he was hung over, and from his night of being out and doing the drinking, and that, of course, has an effect on the relationship between my mom and my dad. And so with that all being said, I got a little bit older and realized that what the effect of all of this drinking is my parents. Well, let me tell you real quick. In that time when we were living in the farmhouse, my dad got sick, and I think it was that he had an injury. He ended up in the hospital, and then his body ended up getting septic, which meant he had poison going through his whole body, and there was a chance that we were going to lose him. And with that being said, he was in the hospital for an extended period of time, and it really hurt my parents financially. And eventually we ended up having to sell my parents' dream house farm, and then we ended up in a different place, and we ended up moving quite a bit as a child. But the dysfunction of the alcohol also, and I don't know that every alcoholic carries this, but anger was an issue in the family. And I would say anger is definitely a life killer. It actually, it distorts and it tears down relationships. Whereas joy, it builds up relationships and it feels like safety. But when you've got anger going on in the family, it really is not a safe environment. When I got a little bit older, my brother actually had an alcoholism problem as well. So I still didn't quite know what was going on. I was young, maybe about 10, 11 years old. And we ended up, visiting this treatment place where my brother was, there for treatment. And then, this is when I stumbled upon what is called like self-development. Well, I realized at a really young age that just because there is a problem doesn't mean you can't overcome or have good come out of a bad situation. So fast forward a few years later, and I found myself going to Al-Anon meetings, which was like a support group for those when your family or a loved one has a drinking problem. And that was my very beginning stages of self-development discovery. And I'll tell you that I really enjoyed that. And I learned and I overcame the point that I am my own person, and I get to make my own choices, even though these situations in the home aren't perfect and there is some dysfunction, but I can help myself to become the best person that I am or that I could be. And my life did not have to stay that way. And when I got older, I could make different choices. So what I want to say is, again, be the first. So don't wait for someone else to go first, because it may never happen. So I was the only one in the family that would go to these Al-Anon meetings, and I thought it was cool because we sat around a table and we were real with each other to help overcome some of these issues. So again, take this tip for today and be the first. Don't wait for someone else to make it happen, because I would have never ever gotten the help that I needed as a teen to overcome some of these issues that my family had. So fast forward to age 19, and I shared this in another episode or another show. I talked about this vision that I had when I was 19, and I told you a little bit about how I had my own apartment, and I was 19 years young, and I was going to beauty school, and the world was in front of me. I could do anything that I wanted. And the one thing that I wanted to do is I was a high achiever. And one of my goals, because of my parents' hardship of money, I really wanted to supply financially for my family. I really wanted to do that. But I had this vision one day as I sat down in this 1-bedroom studio apartment. And back then I was, doing the self-development, and I had my journal book out, and I remembered this reflection and this vision that I had of me speaking one day. And I was so curious about what exactly that meant. But the one thing that I knew is I must be born to speak. That's what I got out of that. I must be born to speak. And so I would also tell you that the hardship in that time when I was, the ripe age of 19, 20 and stuff like that, I also developed an eating disorder because I would consider myself back then a type A personality. It took me a long time to not be type A. But I was that personality where I wanted everything to be perfect, including I thought I could, pig out and eat all the wrong food and then somehow be slim and trim. And those two don't go together. So I was taking the wrong measures to try to overcome this eating problem, but I did overcome that eating disorder, I think by the help of my parents. I can't really remember, but I was doing this harmful behavior. Can anybody relate to that type A personality, whether you're doing it now as an adult or when you were a young kid like me, 19 years old and just wanting to do the whole world and do all the things and be quote unquote perfect there was no such thing. Well, I was, all about making that money and doing all those things perfectly, but I realized that money was not happiness. At some point I realized, I know I want to be happy, but money is not it's not the root of that is going to make me happy. I started to realize at a young age that I needed to turn inwardly and, self-discover things to make my outside world be what I wanted it to be. So that was one of the things that I realized in those early years. And so since I knew that I wanted to be a speaker, fast forward just a few years later, I was like, well, this is when one of my friends ended up taking his life, but I thought, I know that, for some reason I had this vision that I was born to speak, and I felt led to speak at his funeral. So I took advantage of that in a sense where this is what I'm born to do, so I need to step forward and do it even if I'm afraid. So I did it afraid, and I did it to help people have closure, with the loss of my young friend, taking his life. And I did it to honor his life and share stories to help, people in their suffering and the tragedy of the loss of my friend. So one thing that I realized through this process when in my young years between 19 and in my 20s is that your thoughts, I noticed something about my thoughts back then, and that the thoughts that I was thinking are the driver of my life. So I better be careful about what I'm thinking about, because what you're thinking about is the outcome of your life. I'm going to say it again. So be careful about what you're thinking about, because your thoughts are the driver of your life. Hence, this means if you're thinking negative all the time, even about yourself, because it always starts with yourself, what you're thinking inside and the stories that you tell yourself about who you are is that person who you become on the outside. It's how you show up for other people. And how do we want to show up for other people? If we're the people that are leveling up in this world, and we're those people who are being the first, the ones that are becoming the change that we want to see in this world, we need to make sure to look inside, and we need to make sure to check exactly what are we thinking. And the thoughts that we are thinking, remember, are going to produce the person that we are outside in the world. And those thoughts that we are thinking are going to be who we are going to become, what we're thinking we're going to be. So in my, I'm going to fast forward just a little bit more. And here I am in this self-development journey, still the here today, learning and growing. It's what I love to do. That's why I'm here, to talk about leveling up. But when I hit about 30, I entered into my first yoga class. And when I went into that yoga class, it forced me to go inside and really get in tune with my full body, my physical body, my internal body, my thoughts. And I was like, wow, this was like a superpower to me when I went into that yoga. And I just loved it so much. But it actually became like a god to me. Like, I loved it like too much. And at that time, I loved it so much that I, of course, with the personality that I have, I jumped in 2 feet and I became a teacher. So I decided to become certified to be this yoga instructor. And I really loved it. I found my voice there, just helping people in their self-development journey become who they wanted to be. It was very healing, and it gave me the opportunity to use my voice the way that I knew that I needed to, which is to speak, And so if we're gonna speak, why don't we choose good things to say? And how often I just want you to think about this. How often do we say things that we regret? And then sit with that thought. And we can be so careless with our words. There is a scripture that says, goes something like this, like, there's so much power in your tongue. The tongue is life and death. Life and death is in the power of your tongue. And those who speak it eat its fruit. So we're going to eat the fruit, whether it's good or whether it's bad. We're going to eat it, and those around you will have to eat it as well. So remember, your thoughts are the driver of your life. How you doing here? I just want you to check in and say, are you enjoying this moment? Are you kind of turning in a little bit and thinking about some of these things? How about when life throws unexpected curveballs at us? Well, fast forward a little bit further, and I was I was 45. Well, at the time I was probably about 43 or so when my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And this was a curveball. My dad wasn't the healthiest guy. He didn't treat his body well. I'm going to tell you that he didn't think well, for sure. So your thoughts actually have so much effect on your body, and he had so much pain in his body. He suffered for years and years and years with the physical part, but it started to manifest in a way that he ended up having cancer. And it threw this unexpected curveball. Can you relate to that? Having some unexpected curveballs fall into your life. I mean, life is nothing about curveballs, I would say. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have some teens that they get so mad when the day changes and doesn't go as planned. And all I have to say to them is like, this is life. Get used to it. If you think that life is going to pan out the way you expect, day in and day out, it's just not that way. And I would say it really is like that way with our schedule. So when things don't go the way that you want them to or the way that you expect them, what is your reaction? What is your reaction? Like, on my way here today, there was a lot of traffic. I'm in Michigan, United States, Michigan, and we've had some really, really bad weather out here. And actually, the toll is that over 1 million people have gone without power because the ice storms are so bad. Now, those people could either be taking it real bad, or they can be making the best out of the worst scenario. I have a friend who I met on one of my trips, and I follow him on his channel. He's a singer, and you might know who he is. His name is Marty Gates, if I pronounced it right. He's a very amazing Christian Jew, and I say take what works for you and leave the rest. And Marty is so phenomenal. I mean, and so I follow him, and his wife. They did a post where they haven't had power for a few days, but Marty's wife, she went and she did something that I've done in the past when we didn't have power, but basically she blocked off all of the center area of the house. And this is what we do. We get creative when life doesn't go the way we expect it to go. So she put up sheets, probably, because I know that that's what I did, but I blocked off a section of my house when we didn't have power for a few days. And I put that fireplace on, and what she did, they had a wood burning stove, but what she did is she and you might want to know this, because if you don't have power, here's a tip. She had water going all the time on the stove, and the humidity from the stove kept the air warm enough. It kept it at a remaining like 69 degrees in this freezing cold, and we've had below zero temperatures. It's crazy what we've been having go on out here. So if you're a person that's complaining about these situations, I'm always going, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, God. I drove here today in a warm car, and I could have had the thought that I could complain the whole time. I was sitting in traffic, wasn't sure if I was going to make it here on time, but I'm just sitting there going, keep me safe, Lord. Keep me safe. Keep us safe on the road, because people are getting off the road, and there's accidents and all kinds of things happening. So how do you look at things when they don't go the way that you expect them to go? Well, with my dad's scenario and him and the cancer diagnosis that he had, it was a down spiral, what do you call it? Like when you're spiraling down, because this is bad news. Well, how are you going to look at that? Are you going to sit there and just wait for yourself to die, or are you going to do something about it? So my dad did some things, and when you see this, if you see a presentation when I do this, you're going to see this cute picture of my dad and I. He had been diagnosed, but he was definitely making the best out of it, making the best choice out of it. And I have this picture in front of me, and it's this picture of my dad on my birthday. He came out to our house, and we actually, as a family, I'm an adult now and have my own farm. And so I'm standing outside the barn, hugging my dad for my last birthday. That was the last birthday that he was alive that I had. But it was a really great day. It was a really great memory. And I'm so grateful that we captured that photo. So I had that memory to look back on, even though it was my last birthday with my dad. It's a great memory. And so, again, making the best out of our situations. We can overcome any situation by the way that we think in our minds. We can overcome any situation by the way we think in our minds. There's this book out there. What is it called? I think it's called, and I could be a little bit wrong or off, but A Man's Search for Meaning. I think that's the name of it. But this is about a gentleman who was in the war. He was captured. He was, held, I think, in the ground. He was held captive, by evil people for a long period of time. But what he did with his mind was so powerful. He lived to tell about it and to write about it, but he kept his focus and his thoughts on his home his wife and his children. And he said that was the one thing that allowed him to keep on going one day to the next. Just those thoughts kept him going one day to the next. My dad, fast forward a couple years after that diagnosis, we did have hard times. I did have hard goodbyes. I did have to say goodbye to him. And it wasn't easy. I was grieving his death before he died, not easy. And I thought, geez, I did so much grieving that I thought when it came that time for my dad to pass, I thought, well, since I grieved so much, maybe it wouldn't be so bad when he actually passed. Well, I come to find out something very different. That week after my dad passed away, that grief hit me so hard. I didn't see it coming. It was like a freight train. And then the next 2 years for me were very trying, and I ended up in a situation where it was so much for my body to handle that my body shut down for a couple years. And I just really struggled processing that the relationship that I had always hoped to have with my dad, because my dad, while he was here on earth, he did the best he could, but he was pretty emotionally and physically not available, if you know what I'm saying. And so that hope to have that relationship with my dad passed away with him when he died. So I wasn't only grieving his physical death of being gone, but I was grieving our relationship that in a different way that most people might, and that's how it was. But this will be to continued. So next week we're gonna get back into this, but I had hard goodbyes, with my dad. And what I did is I ended up doing my first 40 days and 40 nights in the desert with Jesus. That's how I handled it, 40 days and 40 nights in the desert with Jesus. And that's where I found the next steps of my life to go. And then right at the tail end of that, I knew that the Lord was preparing me the whole entire time. That's what I realized, that when I was in that place of hardship, I knew I was being prepared to actually speak. That's when I knew I was being prepared to go and tell the people. My story was, go tell the people about the good news of Jesus Christ. And so that is the very thing that I did. I went and told the people the good news about Jesus Christ. So my last word for you today is, you must know yourself better than anyone else in order to become the best version of you. That's right, the best version of you. You're the only person that can do the work. So one day at a time, we'll level up together on this show, and we will be doing great, great things. I leave you with this quote by Big Sean. It says, patience is the ability to accept trouble, suffering, and delay without getting angry or upset. I feel like if you can master patience, you can master anything. Until next time, look inside and continue to level up and pay attention to those thoughts. Oh, and guess what? You can reach me and hear about any kind of speaking that I have to offer, the double certified coaching that I have to offer you with transformational coaching on buildingchristianroots.com. That's where you'll find all my information, my YouTube channel, and all of the things. Until next time, much love, Olivia.K.